What if I told you that one of America's wealthiest self-made millionaires sells mobile homes? Not tech, not finance, not crypto, mobile homes. And he's not an exception. He's the rule. Stanley and Danko spent over 20 years studying millionaires, and one of their most surprising findings was this. The majority of self-made millionaires don't work in glamorous industries. They work in businesses most people would call boring. Welding supply companies, pest control, paving contractors. Chapter 7 of the Millionaire Next Door reveals why finding your niche and not chasing the hot industry is one of the most reliable paths to wealth. And it completely flips the script on what most people think a successful career looks like. Let's break it down. Stanley and Danko found that roughly 70% of millionaires are self-employed, even though self-employed people make up less than 20% of the workforce. But here's the kicker. They're not running sexy startups or disrupting industries. They're running businesses that most MBA graduates wouldn't even consider. There are 3 reasons. Why does this work? First, low competition. When everyone is chasing tech, finance, and media, where there is brutal competition at every level for talent, for customers, for margins, the entrepreneur who works in boring business like pest control or office stationery has very few competitors. Second, boring businesses have stable demand. People always need their pests controlled, their driveways paved, their office stationery. These aren't cyclical businesses that boom and bust with every economic headline. They're steady cash generators. Third, the wealth formula favors them. Boring business owners tend to live modestly because they're in environments where no one is trying to outflash each other. There's no pressure to wear a Rolex when your competitors are wearing work boots. Stanley and Danko call this the dull normal millionaire. And they are everywhere. You just don't notice them because they don't look like what you expect. Let's look at our first story. It is the story of a self-made millionaire who built his wealth in the welding and metal fabrication business. He started as a welder himself, learned the craft inside and out, and eventually opened his own shop. Over 25 years, he grew it into a multi-location operation serving industrial clients. His net worth? Well into the millions. But here's the thing that nobody would guess. He lived in a modest home in a middle-class neighborhood. He didn't look wealthy by any standard that magazines or social media would recognize. But his bank balance told a very different story. Stanley even found that among millionaire business owners, the most common industries included contractors and construction, farming and agriculture, professional services like accounting and engineering, wholesale and distribution. Not a single one of those would make it onto a top 10 coolest jobs list. Fast forward to today, and you see this exact pattern playing out at scale. Take Copart, a company most people have never heard of. They run online auctions for salvaged and damaged vehicles. Sounds unglamorous, right? Junk cars. Yet Copart has been one of the best performing stocks of the last 20 years, turning early investors into millionaires many times over. It's a boring niche with massive, steady demand. Or look at Cintas Corporation. They rent and launder uniforms and provide cleaning supplies to businesses. Uniforms, mop heads, that's the business. And Cintas has delivered returns that rival most tech stocks over the last 3 decades. During the 2020 to 2023 period, while the sexy SPAC and crypto bubbles inflated and burst, these boring niche companies just kept compounding. The entrepreneurs and investors who found their niche in these stable, overlooked sectors weren't sweating drawdowns of 70 to 80%. They were just growing. Even in the startup world, some of the most successful recent bootstrap companies are in profoundly boring niches like scheduling software for plumbers, inventory management for auto parts stores, compliance tools for small accounting firms. The founders aren't famous, but they're building real, profitable businesses. The lesson is timeless. The opportunity is greatest where the spotlight isn't. Now, there's a nuance here that Stanley and Danko don't shy away from. Finding your niche isn't just about picking a boring industry. It's about developing genuine expertise and staying committed. The dull normal millionaires didn't stumble into wealth. They typically spent decades mastering their craft. They understood their customers deeply. They knew their cost structures down to the penny. They built relationships that took years to develop. This is actually a competitive moat in disguise. In glamorous industries, people hop from job to job, company to company, chasing the next big thing. But in niche industries, the person who stays for 20 years and becomes the acknowledged expert has an almost unbeatable advantage. They know things that can't be learned from a book or a weekend course. There's also an important psychological dimension. Stanley found that niche business owners reported higher levels of financial satisfaction than many high-income professionals like doctors and lawyers. Why? Because they weren't trapped in a lifestyle arms race with peers. But here's the counterpoint, and it's important to acknowledge. Not everyone is cut out for entrepreneurship, and not every boring business succeeds. Survivorship bias is real. For every welding shop millionaire, there are others who struggled or failed. The point isn't quit your job and start a pest control company. The point is, don't ignore boring businesses. Some of the best ways to make money are in industries that aren't famous or flashy. I think this chapter is one of the most liberating in the entire book, because it gives you permission to stop comparing yourself to the tech founders and finance bros that social media loves to celebrate. The truth is, most wealth is built quietly, in industries nobody talks about. And that's actually great news, because it means the path is wide open. You don't need a Stanford degree or a Silicon Valley address. You need domain expertise, discipline, and the willingness to do work that other people think is beneath them. There's an old saying, dig where the gold is not where the crowd is. The crowd is always chasing what's trending. The millionaire next door is doing the work nobody wants to brag about. There are 3 takeaways from this chapter. First, audit your skills for niche potential. Make a list of industries or skills you have genuine knowledge in, even if they seem boring. Could you solve a real problem in that space? Could you serve an underserved customer segment? The best niche businesses come from deep, specific expertise, not from following trends. Second, study invisible businesses in your community. Look around your town or city. Who runs the commercial cleaning service? The equipment rental business? Talk to them if you can. You'll be surprised how many are doing extremely well financially and how approachable they are, because nobody ever asks them about their business. Third, resist the glamour trap when choosing a career or business. When evaluating opportunities, whether a job, a side business, or an investment, always ask yourself, am I drawn to this because it's genuinely a good opportunity, or because it sounds impressive? If it's the latter, pause. Some of the best financial decisions you'll ever make will be ones you'd never post about on social media. That's Chapter 7 of The Millionaire Next Door, Find Your Niche. The takeaway is powerful and counterintuitive. Wealth isn't built where the spotlight shines. It's built in the quiet corners of the economy, by people who master their craft and resist the urge to chase what's trendy. In the next video, we'll cover Chapter 8, which looks at the difference between jobs that millionaires hold versus jobs that heirs hold, and what that tells us about the future of wealth in the next generation. If this series is helping you rethink how wealth really works, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss the finale. Drop your biggest takeaway from this chapter in the comments. I read every single one. See you in the next one.